It's
Right.
less carb counting, less insulin to cover that carb, less roller coaster, highs and lows. Some people have never heard about it. They've only ever been told to eat this much, take this much insulin. And then they get really upset when they said, well, how come I've never been told this as an option?
Hey everyone. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing an incredible leader in the diabetes space, Beck Newton. Beck is a registered nurse, a practicing dietitian, and a credentialed diabetes educator with over 30 years of experience. She specializes in diabetes, metabolic health, and the gut-brain connection, helping people improve their blood glucose levels and overall well-being through a holistic, personalized approach. So we are going to dive into her very impressive journey and body of work and some powerful insights on diabetes care. Thank you for being here, Beck. I'm so excited to interview you today. Awesome. So fabulous. Well, tell me a little bit. I did go over a spiel here, but tell us a little bit about yourself and then maybe like a little bit about how you have such a wide range of credentialing and an amazing resume here. What made you decide to go into diabetes?
So, yes, I'm Beck. I live in Perth, Western Australia. I live here with my husband and my two very big boys. They're 17 and 20 now, and my dog and my cat. And yeah, we love living here in Western Australia. My journey, I guess, to where I am now is very long. I've been a nurse for more than 30 years. It's been a long time. And I've worked in all sorts of areas as a nurse. I kind of worked in intensive care and orthopedics and mental health, different places across my career. And I've worked in rural settings, big, hospitals in the city. I've worked in community settings. I've been in primary care. And I guess up until only a few years ago, I felt like I had good skills in a really broad range of areas, which to me I really liked. I liked the fact that I could move around and learn new things all the time. I probably spent most of my nursing career actually in more leadership and management roles. I had been doing that for a long time, and it was probably about 13 or so years ago that I was watching something on television and there was this really interesting article around using sort of a lower carb approach for nutrition. And I thought, oh, this sounds weird and interesting, but, I sort of started delving into that. And through that, I really found a massive interest in finding out more about how food really impacts people's health, and changing the way we eat can really have quite significant effects. So, I just sort of did that for myself and my family and, kind of went about my way. But more and more I was kind of thinking, oh, part of me wants to go back to dealing with people. I was doing my thing for nurses and nursing in my previous job, and that was really important too. But I kind of felt like I needed to be back at the ground level, sort of working with people one-on-one. And I thought, well, how can I do that? Can I, should I go back to working in a hospital or working as a nurse? But my interest in nutrition led me to a degree in dietetics and nutrition. So that's what I did. I gave up my nice paying job and Monday to Friday sort of work and went off to uni full time and became a dietitian, which was a tough course, but it was a great course. Through that, I've really found an additional part of me. Like, I'm never going to give up my nursing stuff. I love being a nurse, but it's just another layer that I can now add. And that led me to wanting to work in private practice and setting myself up in my own business where I could be my own boss. My previous experience, I felt quite confident to do that. And while I was studying, I realised that there was a big gap in people who are willing and wanting to work in the space of mental health and eating disorders particularly. And I've sort of realised that with my new dietetic skills and my kind of old mental health nursing skills and experience, that maybe I could offer something in this space as well. I was keen to work with chronic conditions, particularly diabetes and all the different forms of diabetes. I upskilled in both eating disorder and diabetes all at once and became a credentialed diabetes educator and credentialed eating disorder clinician. The importance of the mental health aspects and the disordered eating and the disordered insulin use that goes with that condition. And I think unless you're looking or asking people those sorts of questions, it can be missed. And so, yeah, I kind of pull all those things together now and hopefully support my people and my patients to work on some of those things to make their lives a bit better.
Well, it's something I think we don't consider is that diabetes and eating disorders go hand in hand for whichever type you have. Not only is it like statistically very prevalent, but even like what wouldn't be doesn't match up completely with like a DSM-5
Yeah.
eating disorder.
Yeah.
There's still these other aspects of disordered eating that probably if you have diabetes, you likely have experienced, no matter the gender, no matter the age, because you're immediately tossed into like staring at nutrition labels. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of, in the health and wellness space, there's so much information out there and misinformation and diets and things like that. So you likely, I assume most people with a diabetes diagnosis kind of peter on that edge or fall over it.
Well, there's probably a very tiny amount of people in the world who are not affected by that whole diet culture and that push from society to look a certain way, the thinness and the muscularity for the males. It's something that none of us are immune to.
Right.
Put on top of that a diabetes diagnosis where, for people with type 1, yeah, you have to count carbs. You have to be super focused on your food. So if you already had a tendency to not have a good relationship with food and your body and yourself, then that's just going to perpetuate stronger thoughts and emotions around that. But, probably people with prediabetes and type 2 diabetes, they're often kind of stigmatized in that you brought this on yourself. And the message has been you need to lose weight to improve your condition, even though many of my patients are living in what we would call normal bodies. So that messaging in itself has been really terrible. Every other person I meet has been told to lose weight or watch what they eat and that kind of thing. And it just compounds that, and it's really, really tough for people. I'm aware of that, which I guess, and I hate to say this, but a lot of, I guess, health professionals, I think we're getting better at it, but generally speaking, it's not something that comes naturally. So I hope that when someone comes to see me, whether they like it or not, I'm going to be trying to tap into some of that stuff and discovering whether or not they need support with that side of things as well.
Especially with basic nursing or as you start as an RD, that's not the first thing that comes to mind when you get a consult for someone with diabetes. As you start to gain more experience, you're like, oh, this is definitely something I need to pay more attention to. So I'm sure your clients and everybody you've worked with, I'm sure they definitely noticed having somebody who at least not only understands it, but just like knows it's there and is aware of that.
Just kind of talking about it, putting it out there, kind of plants the seeds so that when they're ready, they can come back and we can discuss those things. Obviously, if I unravel something that is immediately dangerous, like insulin emission to manage weight and stuff like that, then that's something that I would probably try and make sure we're working on as much more of a health priority than whatever else they may have come to see me about.
Right.
But I'm always led by where that person is and what their goals are. Like, as much as I want to be able to think about all the things that, possibly I can see that could be different for that person and keep them healthy for the long term, it has to be around what it is that that person needs and what is important for them. And that can be anything. The wonderful Bill Polonsky over there in the US, he's a psychologist, and I know he kind of opens up every session he has with people with, what's pissing you off today or what's the thing you want to work on. And, I kind of ask something similar when people come to see me. But, along the way we might unravel some other stuff that person already knew, or they actually didn't. They hadn't really sort of considered that was actually, a barrier for them to be making the changes that they wanted to make. So, so I certainly don't ram things down people's throats, but I put it out there on the table for people to select.
Of course. Yes, that's how I know you're a good educator.
I'm a nurse. I'm a fixer. I'm a problem solver. If that's not important to that person right there and right now, there's no point to push that onto them, but it's trying to get that person to, I guess, work out what it is that's stopping them from being their best self.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like kind of the philosophy with nutrition definitely emphasizes sort of like removing any guilt or shame or restriction from eating, which probably for a lot of people feels kind of wild because they've usually you are taught to
Yeah.
do some restricting of some sort. So how do you help your patients shift their mindset around food?
So many people have been conditioned to calorie counting, being on meal plans, doing all the stuff that, as little humans we've been doing for quite a while. And people are quite surprised when they come to me and say, oh, just tell me what to eat, give me a meal plan and you send me on my way. And I'm like, oh, I don't really do it that way. I'm much more, like if someone's really struggling, has no idea what to eat, of course I will give them a bit of structure. But the thing is, it's trying to move away like that mindset of that you have to restrict calories, you have to do certain things, which, like if you look at the diabetes guidelines, it talks about calorie restriction. It talks about very low calorie shakes and bariatric surgery actually endorsing restriction, hugely. Whereas we know that the science and the research would tell us that people will regain their weight 95% of the time over 1 to 5 years. And so we're setting them up for failure in a way and, kind of misery. Like, I've done every single diet you can imagine over the years, right? Yeah, you have success, you lose weight, you start feeling good, but then you kind of stop the meal plan or you stop whatever you're doing. And all of, the weight starts creeping back on again. And a lot of the time you feel deprived and you feel tired and you feel rubbish. But you do it because of this idea that you're going to lose weight, which somehow we've made the most important health in our world. And instead, I've moved a long way, even for myself over, long, long years, but, moving from a place to actually eating for nutrition and getting the nutrients that my body needs to work well and for the metabolism to work well. Because when we restrict energy, when we bring down the calories, our body goes almost into, on your phone, the low power mode. You can only do the basics and you're tired, you're irritable, you're cold, you're cranky, you're hungry, you're angry. It's not a great place to be. So I very much try and work with moving that mindset of kind of scarcity restriction to reach a goal to nourishing and replenishing and building bodies up in terms of the stores of protein and glucose, having our metabolism working at its most optimal level. And then the mindset is really the difficult part because we have very much learned behaviors over a lifetime. We are often using food not just for fuel, not just for hunger. We are using it for a whole variety of things. We catch up with our family, we eat, we meet our friend for a walk, we stop for coffee and cake, we do so many things that involves food, which it's just become part of our lifestyle, I guess. But the mindset side of things is really interesting. And then I guess I often start with people with just understanding the different types of hunger and fullness. Many of us have lost the ability to understand what that is because we've been told to eat every few hours to keep our blood sugar steady, which, I don't actually agree with, but that's what we've been told. And we have been kind of conditioned that, when we're sad or we're lonely, or someone might give us something, we're sick in hospital, people bring us chocolates, like we comfort each other with food as well. So understanding the differences between true physiological hunger, like I haven't eaten for 4 or 5 hours, my stomach is growling and I need some food. That's hunger. But then we've also got all of those, what I like to call sensory hunger cues. So, I just walked past the bakery and I saw that glistening donut and gosh, now I would like to eat that. Or, I went past that place and I could smell this food and now that's kind of set off this sense that I want to eat that food. I want that taste in my mouth. I want to feel that crunch or whatever it is. That's kind of what I see as the sensory food, and it can remind us to eat food whether we're hungry or not. And then we've got that, what most of us probably term as emotional eating, which is really from a deep place in our brain, a really old part of our brain. And that is what's associated with our dopamine and our serotonin, our happy hormones and our ability to soothe ourselves. And so, we've been comforted with food, we've been consoled with food, we've celebrated with food, we've done all sorts of things. So it's no wonder that when we're feeling a bit whatever, that we kind of go, oh, food will help. I think, we're now living in an environment where the food surrounding us is ultra processed. It's been made in factories, and food scientists have affected the ability to light up those parts of our brain when we eat those foods. It's insatiable. We can't get enough of it. And it kind of hijacks our ability to understand when we're full and we're hungry. So, that's another whole beast that, many of us are dealing with too. And of course, they're the sorts of foods that when people are emotional or feeling stress tend to go for, because, our brain's looking for that little pickup, and that can make it really hard for people. So, that's kind of where I start with sort of understanding that, good nutrition is sort of the foundation for a good mindset. Then understanding the drivers and working with some strategies on sort of recognizing those things about what leads us to eat certain foods. But then it's that kind of self-compassion as well, being kind to ourselves, because particularly for those of us who have been in that diet cycle, we tend to be really mean to ourselves when we eat the bad food, or we do something off plan. And it's kind of around that food is food, and it doesn't make you a good or bad person for eating it or not eating it. It's really around just thinking about food as food. And at the end of the day, it is a fuel for our body. I don't want to completely abandon the fact that it is a social thing as well, and it's enjoyable. So I think we need to make room in our lives for that too. It really depends on the individual in front of me and their goal, what their health is like, and what's important to them.
Well, yes, that first step is just like mindfulness, which is in of itself just picking up on the feelings and this. I love the term you use, like sensory. Like I think we forget how how much food is. I'm diagnosed ADHD and autistic, and like was reading very recently about how a lot of the time it's just like this desire for something crunchy to sort of fidget with almost. So, and then I love also that you mentioned that it's not, none of it is good or bad. It just is. Like, we can use food to soothe as long as it's not the only thing we're using to soothe with, or for social purposes, as long as it's not like the only thing we're using to socialize with.
It's actually like for those of us who maybe use food to comfort, soothe ourselves, we've become very conditioned to not put up with feeling uncomfortable or feeling emotions anymore. And it's actually sort of giving you the green light to sit with your emotions, and it doesn't feel nice. Like, it's uncomfortable. But if you're trying to change some things, I love the saying where if you want to change something, you've got to do something different. And if you want to stay the same, keep doing what you're doing. So you do have to actually change the way you do things, or the way that you're thinking about things. You do have to sit in discomfort, and you do have to get uncomfortable, and it's not a nice feeling, and you've kind of got to ride that wave of anxiety when you're doing it. But we're looking for something, convenient and easy to make us feel better in the moment. And, that comes in all shapes and sizes, right? What we're doing is we're dopamine chasing. We are looking for that little thing in that brain to kind of make us feel good and take away whatever feeling it is that we're having that we're not feeling comfortable with. But it's that skill to sit in that discomfort that can be really challenging, but really powerful when you sort of overcome that.
My newly diagnosed people with diabetes, really difficult to just be like, yeah, it's gonna suck. Like, it's not gonna feel good. You kind of have to sit with that. You can't avoid, people avoid eating their favorite foods because they're so afraid of their blood sugars going up or down and that kind of thing.
On the flip side of that, look, lots of people recognize that, for instance, eating less carbohydrates will make their blood glucose journey a lot easier. It's less carb counting, less insulin to cover that carb, less roller coaster highs and lows. Some people have never heard about it. They've only ever been told to eat this much, take this much insulin. And then they get really upset when they said, well, how come I've never been told this as an option? And I am always very careful, because I think, I love a lower carb approach for people managing glucose. But I'm also very mindful of the fact that it can also become another diety type thing as well. And I struggled with this over the years because I love lower carb for chronic conditions, and I work with people with mental health conditions. other things going on where the lower carb and even very low carb can actually be really helpful for them. But it's understanding that we're not restricting, we're still nourishing our bodies, and we're using it more of a medical nutrition therapy rather than a fad diet, which I know people are still calling those things. But finally, the diabetes organisations around the world are all sort of saying that a lower carb approach is a legitimate, good way to glucose levels and all the other health aspects of a diabetes diagnosis. But it is just, you've still got to do it in a way where you are still very well nourished and you've got that good mindset. And that's where I kind of, straddle, because I've got good experience with eating disorders and I've got good experience with diabetes, but I know that sometimes they come together and it's not black and white. You've got to be able to bring those things in together. And it's possible. Nothing has to be extreme. And I think the idea out there is when people hear that someone with diabetes has reduced their carbohydrates, their brain goes straight to ketogenic. And it's not that at all. Particularly for my folk with type 1 diabetes, it's kind of seen that you're going to make ketones is going to get very dangerous. But actually, they've just dropped their carbs. They're not going to extremes. And even if they did go to extremes, if they've got a good dietitian and diabetes educator supporting them, then they can do that safely as well. And for some people that actually helps with some of the kind of, I guess, more emotional or other aspects of eating and living in their own body that can actually sometimes quieten some of that stuff down. But it's not for everybody. And this is where I'm a big advocate for individual nutrition and finding out what works for people and what is it that they can do in their life. If they absolutely love cereal for breakfast, well, then we'll find a way to make that work so that their blood sugar doesn't go from 4 to 12 within half an hour, which is usually experienced.
Yeah. Well, if anybody has picked up on anything, it's that nutrition is so individualized. And while we have little pieces, influences, like we know lowering the carbs can be really helpful for a lot of people, being more mindful and all of these different things, it really just depends on you and your metabolism and your gut and your personality. So having somebody like
who else you're cooking for, whether you've got a fridge.
Yes, it's wild. If you really dig deep into all the literature in nutrition, like it's no wonder there are so many diets. It's because there's just so many different things that the body can do with food.
And, the diet industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, right?
Yeah.
They will promise you the world, but they give you lifetime memberships because they know you're going to keep coming back. It's horrible. And it's really just finding a way. And I always say this to my patients, it's finding a way to eat that you can do for the rest of your life. It shouldn't be something you have to think about. It should just be your foundation that you do. And, it's what you do 80, 90% of the time that makes the most significant changes to your health. That other 10 or 20% shouldn't be the thing that changes your health too dramatically. It's what you do most of the time that makes the biggest differences, yeah? And like, for instance, instead of having 2 pieces of toast for breakfast, you have 1 and you add an extra egg or something. It's kind of just changing things around so that people can still eat the food that they enjoy. But I guess I like to think of it about the food, whether it's maybe helpful or unhelpful to whatever it is the goal that they're trying to achieve. So if that person's goal is, I just want to improve my HbA1c or my time in range, then okay, well then there's a few things that we can tweak, and you can watch that in your continuous glucose meter as well. We can see the impact of different foods, and it's like you can work out, okay, well, which out of the carbohydrates that you're eating are helpful to your glucose levels and not. And you will find that there are some that you can still eat and eat a reasonable amount of, and they will still work for you. But there are others that will skyrocket you and will make your sleep almost impossible because you'll be going low at 2 o'clock in the morning after having too much insulin, trying to manage that high. So, I like those terms about helpful, unhelpful, because that sort of, it's like, oh, yeah, okay. It's better than good and bad.
Totally. It's all trial and error. Again, you have so much amazing knowledge and qualifications and all this cool experience. What is next for you in your work? Do you have any projects, research, or degrees possibly that you're excited about?
Yes, so I have been silly enough to sign up for yet another university qualification. I started 3 weeks ago and I started the Masters of Nursing to become a nurse practitioner, which I'm both kind of terrified and super excited about because it's a massive amount of study and it is full on in terms of the sorts of stuff that I need to learn. But I guess it's stuff that I've always wanted to learn too. I kind of feel like I'm doing a medical degree in 6 weeks, just the amount of stuff that I've had to
Ah,
learn already. But I am hoping, well, my why for doing that is that I am very keen. Like, I think as a dietitian and a nurse, I can already offer my patients kind of a one-stop shop to some degree. This will give me that extra ability to be able to assess people a little bit more thoroughly in terms of their physical health and their mental health, but be able to diagnose and prescribe, and send them off for blood tests and other diagnostics, refer them on to specialists. Really, really good, particularly because I work in private practice and I work with another couple of dietitians and diabetes educators and a psychologist, but we don't have any medical staff. And so when
mm,
someone comes to see me, and I've had people turn up and they've been diagnosed with type 1 and haven't been started on insulin, for instance, would be really nice rather than say, okay, here's a letter to take back to your GP, or can you go to the hospital right now? To go, oh, here you go. You go to
yeah.
the chemist and get that, and I can show you how to use it. And, rather than having to sort of send people back to the GP to kind of get tests that maybe would be useful or have been missed, that they need a referral to see their endocrinologist. I'll be able to do all of that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, my big why. But yeah, that will hopefully be something that I can just put in as an extra layer to be able to offer for people that come and see me as well. Mm.
Yeah. That'll definitely add quite a bit of value to already the incredible amount of value you give to your clients, I'm sure. Because I feel that the amount of times I've wanted to like prescribe something or change the dose. So you
Well,
definitely, I know you have all that knowledge and experience. So it'll be exciting to
yeah,
actually be
and
able
I
to
think
make
a
it
lot of
happen.
our, here in Australia at least, a lot of our general practitioners, they expect that when you're a credentialed diabetes educator that or
Mhm.
kind of authorised to do that. Under the Poisons Acts and all the legislations that we have, well, we're not. We do have the knowledge on how to titrate insulin and match things to food, but under the law, we're not allowed to do it without a doctor kind of saying, yeah, I hand over you the authority to do that, which requires paperwork and all the stuff.
Yes.
We want to cut out that middleman a bit. I do,
I
yeah.
think people really don't realize how a lot of the time the doctors and the endos are consulting the educators and the RDs, and a lot of the decisions they give you often come from the educator themselves. So I'm very excited that you will have the degree to make that happen and make it easier for yourself as well.
Looking in a corner from
Yeah.
having all the things to do, but it's a lot of work. But I love the stuff that I'm learning, so it's really good.
Fantastic. Well, I know you're probably so busy, but where can people find you and learn more about your practice?
Yeah, so my private practice is called Eat Live Well, and my website is www.eatlivewell.com.au. I predominantly work out of the Type 1 Diabetes Family Centre, which is here in Western Australia. We are a Type 1 specific service, which is pretty rare. I know we're
Mm,
definitely the only one in Australia, but we're hearing that potentially the world, that, we are just a standalone specialist Type 1 centre. We have a massive community of people who are peer support. We are doing a lot of work in terms of education for type 1, both for people living with type 1, but also our colleagues, doctors, nurses, practice, podiatrists, whoever, to learn more about type 1. So I work there 2 days a week and do lots of things with them. But I also run 1 day a week clinic for all the other stuff. So type 2, pre-diabetes, polycystic ovaries, mental health, eating disorder, stuff like that. But just in terms of going back to what I do at the Type 1 Centre, I have kind of been really trying to let people know that, for those people who are struggling with disordered eating or disordered insulin use to manage weight, shape, and that relationship with those things from both sides of that, which again, probably pretty rare. It's not many people out there that can kind of bring those two things together. So it sounds like I only work 3 days a week, but I do a lot more in between as well. That's where you can find me. I do have a Facebook and Instagram account too. I'm not very good at keeping my socials up to date, but I do try from time to time. So you can definitely follow me and you might get a few little things every now and then.
But that's fabulous. So places for people to connect, and certainly if they want to reach out and talk more about working with you. So thank you so much, Beck, for talking with me today. I'm so excited to have had the honor of interviewing you. I think you are a perfect person for this, our powerful women in the diabetes space, because you are most definitely that. And I'm glad to have you in the community.
Oh, thank you, Rachel.
All right, Beck. Well, I will talk to you later.
It's been great talking to you today.